Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the second of 4 exciting sessions as part of our Retail Innovation Summit, created in partnership between XRC Labs and the Baker Retailing Center at the Wharton School of Business. My name is Pano Anthos. I started XRC Labs in 2015 as a venture fund and accelerator to foster innovation in the retail technology and consumer goods sectors that we believed were approaching an impending cataclysm. And here we are. COVID has no doubt been a shock and has perhaps changed many of our behaviors permanently. We invest in the earliest stages of startups to promote change and enable the retail and consumer goods community to thrive. We have been building a mutually beneficial ecosystem of leading brands like Estee Lauder, retailers like TJX and CVS, 300 plus venture capitalists and investors, and over 500 industry executives and mentors. So whether you're a student, an entrepreneur, or a corporate executive, we would welcome you into a network that is much bigger than XRC. You can reach me at pano@xrclabs.com or meet Thayer, the managing director of the Baker Retailing Center, at thayer@wharton.upenn.edu to learn more. Now, I'd like to introduce Professor Thomas Robertson, faculty director at Joshua J. Harris Professor of Marketing at the Baker Retailing Center, to say a few words and introduce today's esteemed panel. Tom, I kick it off to you.
Great, thank you, Pano, and welcome everyone. It's great to sort of see you. This is really wonderful of you to attend. I'm going to say just a very, very few words about Baker Retailing Center, and then we'll introduce our moderator and our panelists. So at Baker, we have 3 missions. One is teaching, and we have some brilliant students that we teach retailing to at the undergraduate, MBA, various other levels. The second thing we do is research to advance knowledge of value to the retail community. And the third thing we do is we reach out in events such as this and communicate that knowledge and share that knowledge and learn from what people tell us. So that's what Baker is all about. And this is one of these events which we think advances knowledge. Our moderator today is Santiago Gallino, who is a wonderful scholar at Wharton. We're very, very proud to have him. He's the Evans Distinguished Scholar and is a professor of operations, information, and decisions. And he's going to take over in just a minute. We have 3 panelists who are going to share their knowledge about what's going on and what's changing and what's ahead in supply chain management. So we have Nicolás Aramayo, who's with Wareclouds. We have Sundip Naik from Accenture, and we have Bill Thayer of Fillogic. And they are going to be our very special guest today. Santiago, over to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Tom. So let's dive right in. The first thing we can do to help frame the conversation is to ask you guys, the panelists, to give us a short intro about yourself, about your background in logistics, and that will help us frame the conversation going forward. Bill, let's start with you, please.
Sure. So Santiago, thank you. Thank you to Wharton, of course. Thank you to XRC Labs. So I'm Bill Thayer, co-founder and co-CEO of Fillogic, the logistics as a service platform for retail. I have over 30 plus years in retail logistics, technology, e-commerce, and operations with companies like Macy's, Loehmann's, where I was the COO and CIO of, Century 21 stores, rest in peace, where I was the chief logistics officer, and then broad-based consulting with a lot of other companies like Macy's Backstage, Hearst Business Media, and others. My partner, Rob Cucci, and I founded Fillogic in 2018 with support of XRC Labs to try to help out the physical retail ecosystem. You know, what we do is we take underutilized spaces in shopping malls and convert them into tech-enabled micro-distribution hubs. We provide retailers, carriers with basically a logistics Swiss Army knife that help provide services, logistics services, transactionally to help in this strange, wild world we're living in.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Bill. Sundip, you are a consultant at Accenture and you have a background in logistics that is very impressive. So please tell us about it.
Yeah, thanks Santiago and XRC Labs and Baker Center for assembling the panel, and of course all of you in audience today. I'm a managing director in Accenture supply chain practice. I have over 20 years architecting and implementing transformational supply chain capabilities and technologies at the world's leading retailers and CPG companies. One of the focus areas, as you can imagine, is logistics. From the first mile as goods are sourced or manufactured to the last 50 feet of delivery, always optimizing on cost, service, and efficiency, ultimately in service of the end customer. Outside of consulting, as Santiago said, I have served as an officer at Target, the retailer, as well as at a hypergrowth digital convenience retailer, providing 30-minute deliveries in 500 cities. The point is both these companies have transformed their omni-channel and logistics capabilities, especially in logistics in the last mile over the number of years, to remain relevant and frankly thrive in today's environment.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Nicolás, please tell us about yourself and about Wareclouds.
Yes. Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks so much for the invitation and allowing me to share my experience. My name is Nicolás Aramayo, and I'm co-founder of Wareclouds, which is a fulfillment service provider for e-commerce. I would say my background was more inclined to the broader definition of operations rather than only logistics, working for many years addressing challenging problems such as implementing the matching system for school admissions here in Chile. But now, diving fully in logistics at Wareclouds, we are addressing e-commerce pains in an innovative way, specifically through a sharing economy for two parts of the supply chain, the fulfillment and last mile delivery. The latter you might have heard of. We're creating a community of drivers who connect through an app to deliver e-commerce orders, and this allows us to be quick, cheap, and very flexible. But on the fulfillment side, we are doing what you would imagine in a warehouse inside people's houses right next to the consumers. In contrast to dark stores, we are solving the large cost that comes with them, while at the same time allowing us to be very close to the consumer and get to them quickly. In some cases, we are decreasing up to 50% in fulfillment costs compared to traditional logistics. So with that said, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much for this introduction. I think we're in for a treat with the panel, so thank you. So to get started, logistics during COVID has gotten a lot of attention, in some cases to highlight its resilience, and in others to complain about its limitations. So looking back, what is the main lesson you learned during this pandemic period? Nicolás?
Sure, thank you. I think COVID forced a change that was coming for many years in consumer expectations. I think the most prepared companies in our industry set the bar for what logistic providers should do, and some of the rest struggled, some even up to this date are still struggling, leaving consumers highly dissatisfied with the commerce experience. And this becomes even more relevant considering last mile deliveries highly regarded as the most expensive and inefficient part of the supply chain for e-commerce. But in our case, we took the opportunity from week one to pivot our business model instead of waiting for things to get better. So I would say one of the biggest lessons we learned is how we can build technology infrastructures that are flexible for change. And that is, I think, something not often seen, neither in logistics nor in software developers. So again, this is especially relevant since I think consumers will get more demanding and expect more and more from us in the years to come.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bill, what's your take on this?
Sure. I mean, the big take is just volume in general, right? There was a 10-year growth of e-commerce in 1 year based on McKinsey's statistics. Sorry, Sundip, that wasn't an Accenture number. So when you take that into account, networks that are usually used to handle peak 2-3 months out of the year, completely broken. Parcel networks can't handle it, store networks can't handle it. And so, you know, even though the growth of consumer demand has always been putting pressure on networks, there's usually peaks and valleys. Most retailers, especially when it came to digital commerce, have been at peak since March. You see people that are anywhere from 50 to 100% growth. But our belief on the Fillogic side of things is it's not about building new infrastructure. It's not about using buildings in the middle of the country from a distribution perspective. It's using existing infrastructure, right? So we look at it from shopping malls perspective. Shopping malls are the best facilities with the best proximity closest to the target consumer. And retailers have always been talking about how you're going to compete with Amazon. You don't compete with Amazon. Amazon wins all the time. The key is, how do you work together? So Fillogic focuses so much on aggregation of inbound, aggregation of outbound, because that aggregation allows the ability to use the assets better from a transportation perspective. And it also allows you to fill gaps that you may not have noticed before by other providers. You know, it's not just about parcel, it's about 3PL, owner operators, local delivery providers. It is this large network that you connect through technology and you connect through operations. So it's not going back to the way it was before. So everybody thought if they were going to have a 15 to 20% year-over-year growth in e-commerce, forget it, that's over. And logistics is no longer, oh, well, I need to do this. You know, logistics is a revenue driver. Now, I'm a logistics snob, so I mean, I've always thought logistics is the most important part of it. And as a middle child, absolutely, it's all about me. No, but I think it's all about that logistics growth and how that's going to enable business going forward.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Bill. Sundip, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, similar themes to Bill and Nicolás, but I mean, we saw and we continue to see sort of three macro capabilities for companies to thrive versus sort of trying to survive. And, you know, all of them are inherently logistics powered. So the first one is, you know, really providing a range of consumer convenience options tied to speed very early on in the shopping experience, and giving flexibility to how they want it delivered. So Nicolás talked about delivery, but, you know, curbside, a lot of the retailers played catch up in the last 6 months of last year. Transparency on value and cost of the convenience within the shopping experience is another important one, versus waiting till checkout. I mean, I know that sounds simple, but very hard to orchestrate, and you're going to need advanced technology to do that. And then the last is just to the earlier points, like whether you have the physical infrastructure or not, how do you participate and use the gig ecosystem of assets if you don't have a high node footprint, but really providing higher levels of delivery surety and accuracy. And when we mean accuracy, a good example, you know, one of our clients enabling 1 hour delivery windows, you know, delivering 20 minutes early in that 1 hour window is a defect. People want you to be there when they want you to be there because they've got other things to do. And so that level of precision and accuracy and surety is priceless to customers coming back. And then lastly, I mean, to Bill's point, like, we believe retail, one industry, retail, is at an inflection point. 2-day click to deliver and BOPIS, quite frankly, is yesterday's news. It's moving very quickly to same day. You know, 50-60% of Amazon packages are coming in a day now, and that is probably going to continue to go on for the foreseeable future if you can make the economics work.
Yeah, just one thing to jump back in on the economics. So when you think about same day and local delivery, if you're not aggregating those packages on the outbound side, point-to-point delivery is a stinker. It doesn't work, right? So you look at all those providers of how they're going to make it efficient. A gig economy driver, they're not getting out of their car, right? They're not interested in that. You need to make sure that you're providing a capsulated, you know, delivery component into that truck, and truck, car, bike, whatever. That's the important piece. And that's, you know, that's kind of why we always talk about ourselves as logistics middleware, right? We're the technology, but we're also the ops that can make that aggregation work and more efficient.
Interesting, interesting. So to kind of step back from the moment, and if we think about managers making decisions in this space, there are a number of new players, disruptive business models, like we've seen from you guys, new technologies, the customer expectations, all these topics that you were mentioning, I think play a big role. But I wonder from your perspective, how can managers think about trade-off when making decisions and evolve this part of the business? So what are the risks that they should be looking into to take in the area of logistics to allow innovation to happen inside the organization? Sundip, do you want to give it a try?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think in the space of logistics, I mean, clients are coming and really asking us to either scale what they have today very quickly or differentiate their logistics capabilities, right? So they're wanting to develop strategies over time around partnerships with platforms like we have on today's session, or in some parts of the region, if you're a large company with US footprint, for example, how do you start to even internalize delivery potentially, right? And rapidly pilot alternate channels and speed options, because what's happening now is the tolerance for learning and piloting is better. Designing something that can, and they're doing this because they really want to understand different buying patterns, what it does to customer baskets when the shopping convenience options change, and are they willing to pay for speed and or convenience? And then quickly learning on those pilots and scaling them so that to Bill's point, you then build density in a particular region, it then becomes profitable, and then you move on, right? And that's coming at us very quickly in a lot of segments, even outside of retail. And then in terms of risk understanding the customer first data, right? So real-time consumption is becoming a thing now. It's proving invaluable to companies to retain customers. And also they're not getting some of this information from weekly, monthly POS data. And we talked a lot about the last mile, but even upstream in the first mile, many clients are starting to ask for solving for visibility into manufacturers and co-manufacturers. So an example, what I'd like to call is purchase order science. So really understanding, you have your purchase order, but do you understand the suppliers in those factories and who they rely on and what the raw material status is, so that you really understand the risk to your purchase orders and impacts to what the customer demand is that you're trying to predict, right? And so, be it stores or consumers, the entire order to cash life cycle is moving closer and closer to the customer, but then it's also getting extended visibility beyond your traditional suppliers and really understanding any impacts. And then lastly, the most advanced companies are starting to add machine learning and AI capabilities on top of all this visibility, right? So harnessing unstructured data like social to predict demand spikes or potential logistics disruptions on a weekly or daily basis across all the miles, first, middle, and last, and even predicting same day consumption so that you can pre-position assets, drivers, and so forth, right? Because that's where they're wanting to go.
Excellent, thank you. And Nicolás, if we think about innovation in the space, I mean, clearly your company is a good example, but what are the tensions or the conversations that you have with managers to make the jump to join you guys and if you want, take the risk of try something new?
Sure. And I take a lot of points from Sundip in that before it was normal to receive a package in a couple of days. Now it is normal to receive it same day, tops next day, and tomorrow it will be inside the hour. And we must add to that the willingness to pay for delivery is getting less and less every year as we in the logistics industry get more efficient in last mile. So getting to the managers, I think the logistics field is known for having processes for everything, and that means that changes do not come easy. I think managers should be flexible to allow experimenting new ways to satisfy customer expectations or risk falling behind newcomers, even if that means tried and true processes must change. For example, how can companies offer click and collect options from their own channels and not relying on large retailers, for example? It's a challenge that we could be helping them if we allow ourselves to be more innovative.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicolás. Bill, I would like to go back to a point you mentioned earlier, and this is the view that logistics can be more than a cost factor and become a revenue driver. I would like to hear more thoughts along this line from you, and especially if you have some examples or case studies, or if you want conversations that you have to make this case with companies.
Sure. I mean, one thing that I think is the most important part of all of this, logistics, especially for early stage venture companies, logistics is one of the many things that retailers and brands need to look at. Those are optionality of things that they're focused on. That was pre-COVID. During COVID and post-COVID, no one cares about anything else other than how do I get it to my consumers faster? How do I drop the cost down? Because if it was, e-commerce started out, 20 years ago as that shiny object that somebody had to do. And now it became an important business, but now it's everything about growth and supply chain visibility, as Sundip talks about. Sundip, it's actually pretty funny. Like when you talk about PO entry, the merchant's got to enter the POs first so you can get the visibility, and that's a whole other conversation. But having strong connected technological logistics is a strategic differentiator. Walmart, strategic differentiator, they're killing it. Target, they're doing a phenomenal job with their supply chain. Apple, because their average unit retail, they can hide a lot of those logistics costs in there. But logistics operations and opportunity for optimizing inbound, forward staging inventory, e-commerce, outbound optimization, reverse logistics, that is the top of everyone's list now, because they can't go through another peak where in many cases retailers had their pickups being capped by parcel carriers. They can't go through another situation where they promised an order in 3 to 5 days and it gets stuck at the US Postal Service for 2 weeks. So I wouldn't say that the process of talking about innovation in logistics with retailers is more difficult. I think one of the biggest problems that the retailers are dealing with is, digitally native brands are built on, I wouldn't say next generation, but more newer technologies, cloud-based technologies. They're already pre-integrated with, with a lot of the major shipping systems. But your legacy retailers, those are the ones that have the biggest problems, right? They are on infrastructure that they have not put some time into. If you have a retailer that says, yes, I'm on Manhattan's OMS, which version? Because they probably haven't kept up with, which version they should be on. So much about what we're seeing is, hey, how can you help us? And we are getting feedback from people that they need help to do e-commerce fulfillment closer to that consumer. So from a Fillogic perspective, we win based on doing e-commerce fulfillment at a lower price at the closest proximity to the consumer. If you can bypass traditional parcel, traditional 3PL networks and get right into the DDUs and into the postal service, that is a strategic differentiator. But how can you do that? You have these things called stores that you've never looked at them as a strategic logistics infrastructure. But think about it, retailers, if they have that capital, that store, the human capital, the inventory that's there, and the ability to be able to, service that consumer as close as possible, it's just getting the technology into the right place. And when you think about normally having to go through the IT department to get some of those integrations built or some of those relationships built, all of the reasons why they couldn't integrate with new providers, it's gone. C-level from CEOs, COOs, head of merchandising, all they are focused on right now is how to make their logistics operations faster, nimbler, and of course, much more cost effective. And I think, that's, what we're all talking about is what is the future of logistics? The future of logistics is decentralized, connected networks where you're sharing the same equipment to deliver to different customers, different merchandise. You are utilizing a pipe that's always been there. Your entryway and your exit is just a little bit different, and it's all about aggregation. So hopefully I answered that. I could talk about that for a couple hours.
Excellent. Thank you, Sundip. Can you or do you agree with this idea that logistics can be a revenue driver for the company? And can you share a couple of examples or thoughts around that topic?
Yeah, I fundamentally do agree. And but it takes time, but now you really don't have time because the consumers are moving faster and faster, right? So 4 or 5 years ago, we would tell retailers you have 2 years to build next day, 2 day, or some of them who would even consider same day, that was a 2-year journey. Now that's in months to remain relevant. But I'll cherry pick with some public data. I mean, you look at how is logistics being propelled to revenue centers, or even being talked about in earnings statements from some of the larger companies out there. And even if you're doing delivery well, it's becoming an extension of the brand, and it's also resonating with consumer trust. So, Target announced last quarter their same-day revenue grew 200%, right? And when you think about that number, while that's impressive, you must understand that same-day baskets for many retailers is around 4 to 6x more than an in-store purchase. And also the margin mix tends to be a little bit different, and many times with higher margin items. So what that means is the profitability of those orders is a little bit different than expected, right? And so fundamentally, the 3 points raised earlier around providing consumer convenience, delivery surety, and transparency will unlock two things if you stick the curve, right? If you stick to the program, which is customer centricity in terms of increased retention and higher buying new customers to a retailer's platform. And that should in turn power sort of a logistics flywheel where you can start to build the efficiency in the last mile, right? And if you're a retailer or a CPG with significant physical assets, that's a different story. But if you're a medium-sized enterprise that perhaps is flat or is growing steadily in revenue, you have to embrace and transform your physical assets and complement them with the solutions and sort of digitized assets that we're sharing here now, so that you can start to differentiate and not necessarily compete, but just remain relevant to the consumers and customers you have, right? And most of the time, the journey will involve building capabilities on your own or leveraging partnerships, technology and assets, and it could mean different things by region, because consumer demand we're seeing is very different in the Northeast, very different in the Southwest, very different in the Northwest at different times of the year. And so your density pools are going to change and change over time, and you've got to have a flexible supply chain to be profitable and serve the customer. So hopefully that sheds some light.
Sundip, those are retail numbers. That includes grocery, right?
Yeah, includes grocery.
I mean, but grocery, what's it? It's a 50 UPT, and then lingerie retailers, you're lucky if you have one. I mean, you can hide a lot of stuff in those numbers, and I think that's one of the challenges that everybody has is your order profile and where you're shipping it from. There's no volume pricing anymore, right? Carol Tomei, the CEO of UPS, truly an amazing, she's all about what's good business. And I think that's a phenomenal way that UPS is driving market value. Was destroyed everybody out there. They're saying, hey, guess what? That deal that you had for 10 years, your deal doesn't matter anymore because you've gone higher than your actual volume profile. Everybody's got to figure it out, right? Grocery has done some amazing things with micro fulfillment, but everybody else is left with the legacy infrastructure, right? 3PLs will help you, but you have to move all your inventory 50 miles away to where their building is.
Yeah,
that's not getting you close to the consumer.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Interesting. So another topic that I think is crucial, regardless of whether you are a digital native brand or you like a retailer that has been around for several years and is now successfully transitioning to omnichannel, is how products get to customers. I think we discussed that, but I would like to put some focus on the other part. Like sometimes customers will send things back. And this reverse logistics, it is my understanding that sometimes is a real pain point for the companies. So I would like to get your thoughts on how can companies best tackle the complexities of reverse logistics, if there are things that are new and different in this return business that is painful sometimes for some companies. So Nicolás, any thoughts or examples around the issue of reverse logistics and how to better handle returns?
Sure, I'll share from my own experience. And I think there are already people solving this in new ways. And in the coming months or years, this will become more apparent. But from Wareclouds, we have, I would say, never seen reverse logistics as a major challenge, but let me explain this. We have been tackling this problem since our beginnings, and in our operational models, we allow brands to automatically request for a return or change in an order, and we return the products very quickly to an assigned warehouse by just adding an extra stop on a driver's route, which is very cheap for us. And we do not need to take these returns to each specific vendor. So that's another cost factor that we are skipping. And the quality inspection can be done accommodating for each e-commerce needs since our service is completely decentralized. And I think that's the key, that we can't stand in the way of both satisfying the consumer expectations and solving the e-commerce needs. So we have to be finding ways to be cost efficient for solving these problems.
Excellent. Very interesting, Nicolás. Bill, what's your take on reverse logistics and the challenges there, or opportunities too?
Yeah, I think it's more of an opportunity because, you know, when you talk about some things that come back, you know, I spent most of my career in the apparel world. 25% of what goes out is coming back. And the consumer of today looks as the fitting room of today in their house. So they're ordering multiple SKUs, you know, different sizes across the board. And because most retailers, you know, if your basket size is large enough, it's free shipping. And in many cases, free returns. And there's a lot of great solutions out there that are helping customers get the money back in their wallet much quicker. Whether it's a Happy Returns, it's a Narvar, great companies doing some amazing things. Retailers still on the hook. So if you have an aggregation point where you're taking your returns, that's all well and good. Retailers still taking anywhere from 12 days to 20 days to make that inventory available for sale again. And then when you think about the fact, and that's just the return, think about it from the perspective of what goes outbound. You send 5 units of an order that comes outbound, the customer saves 2 of them. You still have the 3 units that went out that took 5 days, and the 3 units that come back that's going to take. You have that inventory out of sale that's infecting your turn for 3 weeks or more. So our point of view at Fillogic is being a front end that can handle the reverse logistics, but at the same time being able to make that available for sale through our tech. Because if you can make that inventory available for sale or allow opportunities for brands and retailers to zone skip to make that inventory available, whether it's at a store, it's a ticking clock. And one of the things that we think is so important is you don't want to drop it off at, let's say, a UPS place or a FedEx place. You want to put it to a mall location, because what does that do? You know, in some of the locations where we handle returns right now, the number one thing that the customer says, wow, that was a really simple process. I'm going shopping. Well, there you go. That is music to everybody's ears. So being able to use physical retail locations as good, seamless reverse logistics opportunities, that's a huge, huge benefit. And it's, you know, it's something the customer can easily wrap their heads around. So it's not going away. I mean, when you look at Amazon and Walmart, in some cases, it's less expensive for you to throw it away versus them to go through the QA process, returns, QA, put it back in the stock and everything. Just toss it. And that, unfortunately, is not sustainable long-term. So that's a big part of kind of what we believe in. We're very excited about reverse logistics opportunities.
Excellent, excellent. So before we transition to the open Q&A, and I encourage the audience to bring their questions to us, I would like to hear from you guys what is here to stay. I think we touched around this at the beginning of the conversation, but if you get to choose 1, 2 things that are because of COVID or because of the pace that COVID imposed on the growth, what are things that in logistics are here to stay and we are going to see different in the next 3-5 years? Sundip?
Yeah, I think the need for convenience and shop by speed and surety of delivery is going to be here to stay. I think in-store visits will grow as COVID stabilizes, but there could be a little dip for BOPIS in the same day and next day, but we don't see it dropping to pre-COVID levels by no means. We fundamentally believe consumer habits have changed permanently. And so having the full gamut of speed and convenience and when they want it will be very critical to continue to grow and remain relevant to the consumer. And I think to all the points Bill and Nicolás made earlier, even the small and medium-sized enterprises can thrive if they are able to adopt and integrate to logistics gig providers and solutions to mitigate their lack of what I call physical assets. But I think it's going to happen more and more. And you will see a point in time now where storage and delivery capacities are shared and democratized, specifically in the last mile, leveraging cloud logistics and AI-powered solutions to solve all that complexity that Nicolás talked about rerouting and dynamic batching and those fancy capabilities. So,
Thank you very much, Sundip. Nicolás, what are your thoughts in what's here to stay and what we are going to see in the next 5 years?
I think consumer expectations will continue to grow, and we maybe will get to the point that we'll have to offer deliveries in 30 minutes and not necessarily be leveraged from Amazon or Instagram, where you should pay these insane commissions and lose your data from your customers. I think in essence, e-commerce will be getting back control, offering these solutions through their own channels. And I think more than express delivery itself, consumers would like to have options. You want to be able to choose, okay, I would like delivery in 30 minutes and pay a little more, or delivery in 2 days and pay a little less, or even maybe I will pick up the order myself at a particular location with no cost. So I think going further down the line, online sales have no borders. And if logistic companies can make that a reality, meeting consumer expectations, it will open a lot of opportunities to any company, regardless of whether they are in New York or Santiago.
Interesting. Thank you, Nicolás. Bill.
Well, I think things that are here to stay. Shameless self-promotion. Fillogic hopefully is here to stay. We are. Thing has changed. Everything, right? Retailers need alternative to existing logistics networks, right? Whether that is digital networks, transportation networks, and we strongly believe physical retail, it's not dead, it's just in some level of transformation. And what is going to help transform it and make it more efficient is logistics services. Not just us only, but lots of other providers. There's lots of great companies out there that are focusing on the aggregation, whether it's transportation service providers, great technology, cloud-based technology, but the adoption of that, and I think Sundip, you mentioned that as well, that's the key, right? The retailers, I'm not going to talk to anybody because, normally the IT departments are always like, well, who else have you worked with that's a multi-billion-dollar company? They can't wait anymore for those stuff. They have to test and learn and be a little bit more forward-thinking. And I think everybody's learned that now. So yes, it's never going to be the same. Yeah. Sign me up.
I think these are extremely interesting points, and to touch on something that you guys mentioned earlier, I mean, this idea of, I think in the past, I think managers were getting into the relevance of flexibility when it comes to logistics. I think that the flip side of that coin is resilience, and I think that in this time of crisis, this is so evident that I'm really optimistic that the changes that the customers are demanding are going to be more easy to be absorbed by the companies because of the pain and tension that has been recently, they have been recently suffering in a way. And I think that it's clear that those companies that have the right balance between flexibility and resilience were able to capture a bigger market share and growth, which I think goes back to this opportunity to see logistics as a revenue driver. So let me go to some of the questions that we are receiving from the audience. So from Anonymous, the question is, the global challenge of container shortages beyond air freight, what suggestion do you have to decrease the extensive delays? Any reactions to that?
Swim. No. I mean, I can take, I'll start it.
Yep.
Part of what's been the problem is with COVID, all your infrastructure is all in the wrong places, right? Your containers are, in China, your boats are in Long Beach. Everything has to right size itself. You've seen a network for just ocean freight and air freight that was pretty stable. Yeah, there were costs, that would go up and down, but you could really get your hands on infrastructure. That's, as more demand is coming back online, it's going to be another, I'd say, 6 months. Sundip, you might have another point of view as far as how that's going to normalize. But, in some countries, retail is going to be buying a lot of air freight. And in some other countries, people are going to want to say, hey, I need you to take all these empty containers off my dock.
Yeah.
It's just what happens. There's some pretty cool companies out there, like eDray, that are doing some interesting things for managing container movements. But it's just going to be a little bit painful for a while.
Yeah, and I mean, I think 6 months to 12 months is right. And Santiago, I mean, I think how do you mitigate? I mean, we're seeing solutions that are now by lane, whether it's on the road or shipping, it's doing predictive ETA, right? So it's learning the last 6 months of disruption, and it's predicting by carrier or by a freight forwarder, like, hey, there's a high level of probability that this lane that you've sourced 3-4 months ago is probably not going to happen because it's happened so many times before, and it's actually pushing out dates, right? And it's asking you to resource and rethink how you're sourcing freight. So or the other option is you go and buy your own containers, which there aren't many companies that can do that. So there's a lot of money and science being applied on visibility and predictive ETA and machine learning to help you think through how to plan much more proactively, right? And mitigate some of the disruption and capacity shortages, to Bill's point.
Interesting. Well, thank you very much for that. So I have another question from Josue, and I'm sure that this panel will have a lot of thoughts around this issue, which I think is a relevant one as well. So getting closer to customer is a must, but how do you handle the inventory fragmentation, and thus the increase in inventory needed to be able to fulfill your lead time promise? A retailer have stores. How about those players who are not retailers?
I can take for starts that at Wareclouds, precisely what we do is that we serve like these middle-size, small-size e-commerce stores, and use cases as simple as try to predict when an e-commerce will be out of stock of a particular product, to give them time to get the products to their warehouse. It's a very simple use case to think about, but it has a tremendous impact in solving just precisely that problem. So again, I think there are already initiatives that are hitting right in that kind of problems.
Just one thing I think is that the tech is there, predictive analytics, where you should place your inventory. A lot of great companies are doing that. Part of the problem is the ops doesn't exist. Once again, if you're a 3PL, your core specialty may not be e-commerce fulfillment. You may not have any integrations with any gig drivers. That's a big part of kind of what we do is, can you ship 1,000 orders a day out of a very small space? Sure. Yeah, we can do that. But it's the ability to say it's a whole long-term battle of wheels versus walls. The transportation assets, they're going to move it to the consumer, but who's the distribution assets, that building that's going to make it most efficient? And that's kind of why I think the decentralized model, and there's not just folks like us, there's folks like OHI that are doing some of these things and making better utilization of the space. But I think that's where it becomes, there's the 3PL organizations right now are overwhelmed with volume, and they still can't keep up. It's just creating this whole new infrastructure.
Interesting. So to change a little bit the topic here, a question from Isabella. How do you think that technological advances like self-driving trucks, drones, delivery will change the way companies arrange their distribution systems. And clearly this will impact logistics too.
I can take a stab at this one. You know, autonomous delivery and drones and other models to deliver, obviously in many countries, highly regulated, in some countries, not so regulated. In fact, in the US, the federal entity has left it up to the states to determine how they move with AGVs. But, you know, we believe in the next 2 to 3 years, 75% of deliveries will be through a localized node. That node could be one of Nicolás's nodes, it could be one of Bill's nodes, or it could be your company's node, right? But it's that 15 to 20 mile sweet spot. And the AGV companies are banking on that fact, right? Because there's a lot of science around range, density, route optimization, so you can kind of do the milk stop and then get back to not necessarily the same node, but maybe another node close by, so it can keep moving, right? Because think of AGVs as planes; they got to keep moving, right? If they don't move, well, you're losing money, right? So I do believe that the world of AGVs is coming quickly, and there'll be 3 or 4 states, you know, California, Arizona, at least in the US, Holland is also forward thinking, I think, that will push this. And, you know, today in the UK, there's some pizza companies that are doing delivery via AGVs, right? So I think it's coming, but I do think it will really, really power the same day, next day delivery ecosystem, where these assets, you know, once the cost of the batteries come down, once the cost of the actual bots come down, and safety regulations are proven, I mean, I think it's going to add a completely different ecosystem of speed that will still be, but you're still going to need the node where the AGV comes in and out of, and that's not going to change, right? I think that's my perspective.
Interesting. So here we have a question for Bill. Connie is asking, what are the biggest challenges of linking retailers/malls to share logistic purposes?
So as a transactional logistics provider, they're all doing the same process, right? You receive a carton, you receive the merchandise. That's all the same thing. The issue is the aggregation of those processes. So since we're transactional, both on the transportation side as well as just our pick and pack functionality, we're saying, hey, retailer, you have 20 different things to do during the day. 7 of them are logistics. Outsource that to us, because we have a team and a staff in these mall locations where we can support those services. If the biggest issue, and granted we have some frictionless methods to be able to provide that support, but if the biggest issue is an integration of an order type or a package type, there's very simple ways to be able to manage that. And as we continue to open locations, right? You know, we are opening locations across the country this year. It is a standardized logistics infrastructure. And the key is once an integration is built with us at Fillogic, that turns on every single building where we are in a mall that can turn that retailer on in that space. So it's always about, okay, what are you willing to do from the integration side of it? But the savings that we can provide and the service levels that we can improve on and the innovation that we can continue to add to what we do, it allows almost an innovation in logistics that the retailer no longer has to worry about doing that by themselves, right? When you think about it, what is a mall? A mall aggregates 150 retailers. But if you're providing that service to all of them, number one, your innovation costs go down. Number two, your technology integration costs go down, and your general performance goes down, and your rates of all those services go down. Now, if it was before COVID, all right, that was sort of interesting. Now it's how do we do this and how much faster do we make that happen? You know, it's really a technology and it's an interest time. Do you have enough things that make this important to you? Nobody's really focusing that much on some of the other peripheral items. It's all about logistics. And so that's why we think it's a good time for people like us.
Excellent, thank you. Nicolás, a question from me to you. I think the business model that you describe is extremely interesting, but I wonder, like, I mean, to make a parallel, like if you think like the first time I hear the idea of Uber, like you have an app, it's gonna pick me up, and immediately you start to have questions about, okay, reputation, how I know I'm gonna be safe, how I know it's gonna be arriving on time. I'm sure you have these type of conversations with companies that are looking into using your service. So I wonder how those conversations go, and what are the things that you can do in Wareclouds to address those issues.
I think not so many conversations as you might think from e-commerce. At the beginning, it was, we were using more, standard places like offices or whatever before transitioning to houses, which is way more disruptive. And seeing, okay, there's like these so many brands doing this, and I know this brand that we have like 30 to 40% of referrals through e-commerce. So they try them all, and they themselves try to bring other e-commerces. Has helped us a lot in avoiding a little bit that specific problem. But I think it's also important to depart with the drivers. Sending dozens of drivers to people's houses can be eventually a little problematic. So we have to be thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead before having some undesirable events happening. So we're always trying to think a little bit ahead, providing safety and having a community that has a really positive environment. Like nothing closely similar with what you would expect like at a big warehouse. It's a completely different environment, and I think we have to really try to maintain that going forward.
Very interesting, very interesting. Okay, one last question from another participant. We've heard that faster and faster delivery is good, but the question is, at what cost? Do they think that people will be willing to pay for delivery? I think is you guys. I get that they want for 2 days or some amount of time, but what about these 2-hour deliveries? Cost is very high. How companies survive without charging for it? So I think that the question is around this tension between speed and cost, and how to handle this without explicitly charging for it.
I'll start.
Take a stab. Yep.
I'll take the point from Bill. I think aggregation is key to drive the cost down on one side, and we're already advancing in these very cost-effective models to try to bring the cost down and not going from one stop to another, which is very expensive. Try to get 5 orders and then do a very small and quick route, and have these fulfillment micro hubs really close to the customer, and at a low cost can be precisely solving for that without increasing the consumers, what they have to pay.
Sure, just to jump in on that as well, it's not so much of the service that the customer buys, it's the time and how much freight you can put in that delivery vehicle. You could have a same-day delivery as well as a ground shipment and an expedited shipment go in the same car, because if it's going, if you're able to isolate it to a couple of 100 yards, if you can say, hey, I can deliver from a shopping mall or a region around a shopping mall to a street and put 30 packages on a street, you've just made a big, you passed on a major benefit, because you're, number one, you have somebody else that's loading the car or the truck. And then that person that's doing the delivery is not wasting wear and tear on the vehicle, distance, because they're able to make that delivery in more time. You're basically trying to create through aggregation very focused deliveries, and as many packages that you can put in. That's kind of what makes your life much easier. I mean, Shipped, when Target bought Shipped, who acquired Deliv through that, It's all because of their routing technology. How can you make that very, very dense? How can you put enough in that pipe? Sandeep, you're probably part of that whole thing. So
yeah, and I mean,
where it is.
the magic number for consumers, at least our research is, again, for same day delivery, mostly in the Western economy in the US, it's a $5 number, right? So if consumers are willing to spend $5, but anything more than that for same day, that's not two-man delivery of furniture or patio, something heavy, bulky. I mean, they're not gonna, the magic isn't there for them to spend more, right? But if you can get that density equation right and the speed equation right, you can get below that cost curve.
Right. And grocery is different. That's the whole thing.
Grocery
It's
is
like
different.
general merchandise. Grocery is a whole different deal
Whole
because
different game.
you want your peas, you want your steak, and you want your Fritos. So, I mean, that's a whole different conversation. But general merchandise, whole different conversation.
Well, that's great. So I think we're close to the end. So I would like to make a quick round across you guys to see if you have any final thoughts or takeaways for the audience today. Sundip, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think consumer behaviors have changed fundamentally. Speed, convenience, price transparency is very important upfront. I think the shared logistics platforms and assets capability needs to be leveraged by many enterprises. You're not going to be able to build infrastructure fast enough, and really understanding same day consumption, next day consumption, and having that demand signal go all the way up to your legacy planning applications or solution or teams is extremely important because it's going to keep growing. Is where we see things.
Excellent, thank you, Nicolás.
Sure.
Final thoughts?
I really hope more events like this happen and we discuss these issues and look forward for the next things to come. I think logistics is not known for being a very sexy industry. We are not getting the best talent out there or innovators to work on the problems we're discussing, except for you. And we are at a point where this could change completely. We're coming to the front, and people who create amazing solutions can have really tremendous impacts on the whole commerce picture and every one of us who buys something and experience these service deliveries. So I'm really positive about the years to come for our industry.
Yes, thank you, Bill.
I still love you, Nicolás. No, just I want to thank everybody on the panel. It's been enjoyable. Thank you, of course, to Wharton and the UPenn infrastructure. Thank you so much. And of course, XRC Labs. I'm a proud member of that XRC Labs family. XRC Labs strong, but yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of everything that's happening in the logistics space these days. And I've always thought it was the most interesting part of retail. It's where the technology and the people and the process all come together. And there's just so much great things happening in the space once we come out of this last year or so. So everybody stay safe. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. So I think that's right. And to echo what you guys were saying, I think that timing is sometimes good, and in this case, it's making logistics look sexy, which I think that it would have been something that will make people laugh a few years ago. So I think that the fact that we are together now discussing this with the big audience, paying attention to these topics, I think it's a testament to that fact. So. With that, I'd like to express our gratitude to the audience for attending today. We hope the session was insightful for you. I thought it was extremely interesting. To you guys, our panelists, thank you for your time and sharing your experience with us today, and to XRC Lab for your partnership. The next session of the Retail Innovation Summit is on the future of fitness tech on Wednesday, March 31st. Featuring executive from Nike and Whoop. You won't want to miss it. Look out for an invitation in your inbox in the coming days. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take it easy.